Welcome back. If you just joined us, our guest on this episode of Question Time is the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami. Don't go away. Wouldn't this create further judicial dilemma?
Well, I don't think we have been having the dilemma that has set into the whole process before now was the dilemma of delay arising from perhaps the problems associated with investigation, the problems associated with drafting of charges and indeed judicial conduct of the proceedings. So, and I think we have succeeded in identifying that as a problem and then trying to eliminate it through having in place a national prosecution team. So in as much as the possibility of pursuing the aspect of having specialized court through legislative process could be a possibility, but that does not mean that we are not taking any steps to have perhaps the high-profile cases being determined with or without having in place special courts, as you rightly call them.
Tell us the terms of reference of the national prosecution team.
Well, the whole essence in a summary form of the National Prosecution Team is to have in place something that could assist the government in speedy determination of cases, something that could consider the agenda of the government to ensure that cases are properly and expeditiously determined. So the terms of reference of the committee are within the context of elimination of delay and then having expeditious determination of cases by way of having in place a cross-fertilization of ideas, cross-fertilizations of support, collaboration of agency, and collaboration of all stakeholders that has to do with the prosecution of cases.
Your role in the MTN saga has been called to question. Could you put things in the proper perspective?
What you need to know, as far as the MTN issue is concerned, it was a product of a judicial process. I think at a point, MTN now instituted an action before Federal High Court in which the Office of the Attorney General was a first defendant and then NCC was a second defendant. So again, the background of the constitutional role of the Office of the Attorney General, it goes without saying that when a matter is in court and then Attorney General is equally made a party, it is only logical that the Office of the Attorney General should prominently feature because the Attorney General is the chief law officer of the Federation and he is expected by that position now to take the lead as far as defending the government agency is concerned. That is how the interest of the Office of the Attorney General specifically comes into play, arising from the fact that there was a matter instituted in court, and then the Office of the Attorney General was a defendant in that matter.
The National Assembly is saying the reduction of the MTN's fine is contrary to the NCC Act.
Well, the NCC Act is clear that the power is vested on the NCC to enforce fine, and then the right of review of the fine is equally vested on the, in the NCC, arising from the position of the NCC's Act. There is no two ways about it. There was the power on them to impose the fine, and there was equally a power to revisit it, in fact, to entertain complaints from the persons against whom a penalty has been imposed. So against that background, the power of revision is definitely in the NCC's Act. So it is not out of place to reconsider when the need for so doing arises. The law is there and it's clear.
Now, on the Presidential Interagency for Debt Recovery, for Loan Recovery, we've seen AMCON closing some companies. What's the mode of operation and what's their mandate?
Well, as far as the issues of closure of companies are concerned, I think it is an issue that is exclusively within the powers of the AMCON. AMCON is established by an act, and then the act has provided the roles, the functions, duties, and responsibilities of AMCON. So to the extent that there exists a law, I think the role of AMCON is regulated by it, and then it is the law that determines what they can do, what they cannot do, the limitations and scope of their own limitations of their respective powers over it.
Your role as the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice has featured most prominently, more than any Attorney General in the previous regime or administration. Would you say you are acting within the confines of your office?
Well, I think you have to look at it from the point of the responsibility of the Office of the Attorney General, arising fundamentally from Section 174 of the Constitution and perhaps maybe Section 150, among others. I think the Office of the Attorney General is an office that is law-based. Wherever you have a law, whichever law you have in place, the Office of the Attorney General has a role to play as far as that law is concerned. If you are talking of the National Assembly, the law is there to regulate and guide what they do, how they do it, and the way and circumstances they should do it. If you are talking of the executive, the laws in respect of each and every actions are there. If you are talking of the judiciary, the laws are there. So the sum total of what I'm trying to say is our society is a law-based society in respect of which the law is expected to be the guiding principles for our general conduct. So in essence, it means that as far as the enforcement of the law is concerned, the Office of the Attorney General has a role to play in each and every conduct of the executive, in each and every conduct of the judiciary, in each and every conduct of the legislature.
How far has this administration gone in the recovery of stolen funds?
Whatever agency exists in government that has a role of investigation must definitely key into the recovery process, inclusive of the Office of the Attorney General. So arising from that, the Office of the Attorney General prosecute, and then along the prosecution line and investigation, definitely the issues of recoveries must come into play. EFCC as well has a greater role to play. They investigate and prosecute. Along the process of investigation, the recovery of funds naturally comes into play. The Office of the National Security Advisor as well has a role to play as far as certain level of investigation is concerned. And the Office of the DSS equally have further roles to play. So in essence, you find all these agencies perhaps playing a greater role in the recovery process, even by way of receiving exhibits that are intended, that could, at the end of the day, be used in court for the purpose of proving the commission of offenses. But then the bottom line is whatever recoveries are made, generally speaking, there exist accounts of the federal government being maintained in which the recoveries eventually are transmitted. So to that extent, what I have to say is that yes, there are recoveries being made, and yes, these recoveries naturally goes into the accounts that of the federal government, substantially maintained by the central bank. But then it depends on which of the funds should naturally go into the consolidated revenue account, because when you have funds over which there are certain litigations, they cannot naturally immediately go into the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government. So it all depends on the circumstances, but the recoveries are made, the recoveries are equally transmitted into the account, and then such recoveries that were made by the federal government over time, ever since the coming into place of this government, are indeed disclosed to the public.
Could you explain the expenditure policy of some of these recovered funds, and what are these funds being used for?
Well, I'm not in a position to give you any information as to expenditure, but I know as far as the recoveries made by the Office of the Attorney General are concerned, no expenditure has been incurred yet. But there are certain recoveries that came into play arising from the actions and from the actions of certain agents that were given the mandate and instructions to make recoveries of funds. So in respect of them, we naturally process through the financial regulations that are in place. We process for the payment of their dues, which has not been processed, which none has as yet been processed, because the process is a continuous process emanating from my office, perhaps through the Ministry of Finance and perhaps the Office of the Accountant General. So as far as the expenditure of other agencies is concerned, I'm not in a position to say, but as far as the recoveries made through the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation are concerned, no single expenditure of ₦1 has been made arising therefrom.
You may also join us in this conversation by sending us your comments on our various social media platforms showing on your screen. Coming up on Question Time, what's the federal government's response to allegations of politically motivated and selective anti-graft war? Find out from the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice after the break.